There are moments when your mind suddenly brings back something you thought was long gone. An old conversation, a mistake from years ago, a memory you didn't invite. It might appear while you're driving, walking through a grocery store, or lying awake at night when everything finally becomes quiet. And when it happens, your first reaction might be confusion. Why am I thinking about this again? You thought you moved on. You thought you had already dealt with it, but suddenly it's there again, clear and vivid, almost like your mind pressed replay without asking you. And that can feel unsettling. Sometimes the memory carries a small sting of embarrassment. Sometimes it brings regret. Sometimes it's just a strange heaviness you can't quite explain. So you try to push it away. You distract yourself. You scroll. You change the subject in your own mind. But the more you try to force it out, the more stubborn it seems to become. And eventually, a quiet worry appears. Why does my brain keep doing this? You might even start wondering if something is wrong with you. Maybe you think you're overthinking. Maybe you believe you should be past this by now. But what's happening inside your mind is far more ordinary than it feels, because the human brain has a very specific way of processing emotional experiences. And most of the time, it doesn't happen all at once. When something overwhelming happens in life stress, embarrassment, conflict, the sheer nervous system doesn't always process it in the moment. Sometimes it can't. In those moments, your mind does something protective. It stores the experience away, not as a finished story, but as something unfinished. Your brain moves on so you can keep functioning. You go to work. You keep responsibilities moving. You stay productive. From the outside, it might look like you handled everything just fine. But internally, a small part of the experience stays unprocessed. Not because you failed, but because your nervous system was busy surviving the moment. And later, sometimes months or even years later, your brain quietly returns to it. Not to punish you, not to trap you in the past, but to finally finish understanding it. That's often why old memories resurface when life becomes a little calmer, when your environment is safer, when your nervous system finally has enough space to slow down. Your mind begins gently reopening things that were paused before. It's a sign of processing, not regression. Think about it this way. Your brain is constantly scanning for unresolved emotional loops, and when it senses that you're safe enough to handle them, it brings them forward again, not loudly, usually just in small flashes. A thought, a scene, a sentence someone once said. At first it might feel random, but underneath it, your mind is doing something very intelligent. It's trying to integrate the experience to place it into a story that makes sense. Because when experiences finally make sense to us, they stop echoing. But until they do, the brain occasionally reopens them. This is why those moments often arrive when you're resting, or when your day slows down. Your nervous system is saying, In its own quiet way, we have space now. And once you understand this, something interesting happens. The shame around those memories starts to dissolve. You stop interpreting them as proof that you're stuck instead. You begin seeing them as signals that your mind is still working things through. In other words, your brain hasn't given up on understanding your life. It's still organizing things in the background, and that process can feel uncomfortable. Sometimes, because memory doesn't always return with neat explanations. Sometimes, it arrives with emotion first. A little tension in the chest, a quiet sadness, a sense of I wish I'd handled that differently. But even that reaction is part of the mind, updating its understanding. Your brain is comparing the past version of you with the person you are today. And often, those memories resurface precisely because you've grown. You see the situation differently now. You have more emotional awareness, more perspective, more understanding. Your mind is revisiting the memory with new tools, and that's how resolution slowly happens. Not through force, not through trying to erase the past, but through quiet integration. The moment eventually softens. The memory becomes less sharp, less charged, more like a chapter than an open wound. But this process doesn't happen under pressure. The brain doesn't process well when it feels judged or rushed. It processes best when it senses safety. That's why the most helpful response when an old memory surfaces is often the simplest one. Not pushing it away, not analyzing it, endlessly just allowing it to exist for a moment, without deciding what it means about you. Because the truth is, the resurfacing itself is already part of the healing process. Your mind is doing what minds are designed to do, revisiting, reorganizing, making meaning, and slowly turning experiences into understanding. So if an old memory shows up tonight, if your mind suddenly drifts back to something from years ago, it doesn't necessarily mean you're stuck. It might mean your nervous system finally feels safe, enough to process something that once felt too heavy. And that's a quiet form of progress, not loud, not dramatic, but real. Your mind is not broken. It's working carefully at its own pace, trying to turn the past into something that no longer needs to interrupt your present. And over time, that's exactly what it does. One memory at a time, slowly, quietly, until the weight of it becomes lighter, and eventually the mind grows still again.